Isn't she wonderful? Makes life easier. I've been asked to talk about 10 minutes on why we need global action. The only challenge is I've just been talked about 5 minutes ago that this is what I should be doing. So I'll unfold my talk as I talk to you, if you don't mind. It's a wonderful time to be born right now in this world. People live longer, healthier lives than ever before. More people are in education. More people have access to clean sanitation and water. In fact, every day, 230,000 people get lifted out of poverty. Every day, 300,000 people get access to clean water and sanitation. In fact, we've done a tremendous job over the last 3 decades where we've lifted 4 billion people, where we've lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. When Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, developed the Millennium Development Goals in the year 2000, he had a simple objective. Between the year 2000 and 2015, to halve the number of people living in poverty. At that time, it was defined as $1.25 a day. And lo and behold, we've actually achieved that. 5 years ahead of target, which is not bad. China was a big part of it, but also many other places in the world. So it's a good moment to be born, and I give my little talk here in the spirit of optimism. But as Charles Dickens said in his book that he wrote in 1859, he wrote a book which was called The Tale of Two Cities. It talked about Paris, very appropriately here, and it talked about London. And he talked about that time, it was the it was the spring of hope, and it was the winter of despair. And I think that is where we are. Despite the wonderful news of having lifted so many people out of poverty, it is also clear that our current economic system has some challenges, especially in the crisis of 2007, 2008, the financial crisis that became a political crisis, an economic crisis. We discovered that our system wasn't really sustainable. Yes, we had lifted a lot of people out of poverty, but we had done that in an unsustainable way. Enormous levels of government and private debt, enormous levels of overconsumption by some parts of the population, and frankly, leaving too many people behind. And in any system where too many people are left behind, the system will ultimately rebel against itself. And that is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing it in the political arena, where populism and nationalism and xenophobia takes over again. And we see it with the people in the streets. More than any time in history, more people in more countries making their voices heard. Many of the people out there feel that since the financial crisis, banks might have been too big to fail, but people certainly were too small to matter. And if we don't create economies that are more inclusive for everybody, we're starting to shoot ourselves in the foot. Now, there are some big challenges that we've never faced before. We all know that we need to decarbonize the global economy. We know that we need to move to a circular economy and use less of our resources. We also know that we need to create an economic system where more people benefit from it instead of only a few people. And yes, we also know that we need an economy that is where the financial market is again subservient to the real economy versus what is currently happening, an economy that seems to serve the financial markets. These are big changes. These are big changes. In the past, governments would take care of lots of these things, duly elected governments in a democratic way. Right now, unfortunately, many of the challenges that we have, climate change, cybersecurity, if you want to, financial market regulations, are challenges of global nature. And the reality is, we don't have a good global mechanism to deal with it. Most of the global mechanisms that we invented were invented in 1944 at the time of Bretton Woods, when 44 countries, as a coincidence, signed these wonderful agreements that gave us the OECD, or what is now called the WTO, or the World Bank, the IMF. And it is clear that the world has changed many times since then, but we haven't adapted. So global governance is difficult. My argument then is very simple. If there is a vacuum there, we can be cynical about it, we can be skeptical about it, we can make jokes about it, but ultimately it's our responsibility to ensure that our economic system functions. Not only functions now, but for generations to come. And the private sector has an incredible role to play in that. The private sector is 60% of the global economy, 80% of the financial flow now in the world, and 90% of the job creation. Now you might say, how can they do this? It's overwhelming. I don't know where to start. I can't get my hands around it. Fortunately, in the year 2015, 193 countries came together at the United Nations, including the Pope, may I say. And they signed something that was very important called the Sustainable Development Goals. And they had a very simple objective, to finish the job that Kofi Annan started. Kofi Annan's 15-year plan called Millennium Development Goals resulted in halving the number of people in poverty. So the Sustainable Development Goals have to finish the job. When the Apollo went to the moon, they didn't go halfway and then they said, well, the food is pretty bad on board, I'll go back home again and have a decent meal. When Eugene Bolt ran the 100 meters, he didn't stop at 50 meters and said, now I'm tired, I'll do the other 50 meters tomorrow. We finished the job. And the job is really to ensure that we irreversibly eradicate poverty, and doing that in a more sustainable and equitable way. By all means possible. The two biggest challenges in that right now are climate change and inequality. And the Sustainable Development Goals, in the absence of any global agreements with governments, is probably the only and most important moral framework that we have. 17 goals. Goal number 1, no poverty. Goal number 2, no hunger. Goal number 3, hygiene and well-being. Goal number 5, gender equality. Goals for oceans and forests. Goals for climate. Goals for peace and justice. But the most important goal is actually goal number 17, which is one of partnership. And this is what this panel is all about. It is impossible to change the system that we need to change by keeping operating the way we're operating. Einstein said it very well when he said the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It is not going to work. The problems that we have to solve have to be solved at a different level than the problems where the problems were created. And this is where the partnership comes in as goal number 17 in the Sustainable Development Goals. But it's not just a partnership of you work for me or here is a contract, you supply my products. No, what we are talking here about is a partnership for humanity. A partnership where we put the interest of others ahead of our own, knowing that by doing so we're better off. A partnership that is intergenerational. A partnership that is based on a higher level of trust. A partnership that has purpose right in the core of what we're doing. This is a partnership for humanity. And if we don't have the courage, I'll get to that in a second, to embrace this broader partnership between the private sector, between civil society, between the academic community, between the governments, etc., we're not going to solve it. You know, we have all the answers, I believe, or most of the answers, to solve the issues that we face in this world. We actually know how to produce food without cutting down the forests. I think we know how to build toilets, yet 1 billion people are still deprived. I also think that we know how to build homes, yet the homeless population goes up. We frankly know how to give people a bar soap so that the children don't have to die before the age of 5, which is what happens to 4 million children still in this world. We don't need more PhDs. We don't need more people to go to Mars or Pluto to find the answer. The main answer that we have for all of these challenges is really ourselves, our own willpower. Do we really care? Do we care individually and do we care collectively? And it starts with that. If we continue to live on our little islands of prosperity in this increasingly larger sea of poverty, we're not going to get there. So the biggest partnership that we need is a partnership for humanity. And frankly, it's the biggest business opportunity. I would argue that we are at the point now that we've waited so long to act at this higher moral level that the cost that we are incurring right now is higher by not acting than what it would cost us to fix the problem in the first place. Not giving women the same rights in this world in terms of access to financing, education and land rights is costing us $28 trillion. A totally broken food system where we cut the lungs of this world, the forest, waste 30 to 40% of the food, create problems of obesity and diabetes on the other side is costing us $12 trillion. Just by not addressing the basic issues, we see the conflicts and wars in this world going up. This population that currently inhabits the wonderful planet Earth is spending 10 to 12% of its GDP on conflict prevention and wars. We're spending 2 to 3 times more on each of these goals than what it would cost us to implement all of the goals and avoid the issues in the first place. And then we think we have the right to call ourselves the most intelligent species. There are emerging things happening. The WEF, the World Economic Forum I came from last week, was talking about multi-stakeholders for the first time. Wonderful initiatives coming in, where thousands of people rally together. When a government doesn't move, we all of a sudden see we are still in movements. The American Pledge movement, 75% of the American GDP is working action plans. We see successful partnerships like Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccination, countries, companies, civil society getting together to eradicate diseases once and for all, even more important now than ever. We see partnerships coming together at country levels, where we look at this country, for example, a new social contract. Or how do we ensure that we get out of deforestation in our value chains? It is with these broader partnerships where people understand that their responsibility is not just to their shareholders, but first and foremost to ensure that we can live in harmony in this world, that I get the most strengths, but where I also see the most opportunities. Companies that get that will do very well. Companies that continue to think that they can operate in a system where society is paying for all their externalities, and where in fact they're operating under a system that makes the world worse than what it is, I think will increasingly be rejected. You start to see it around you, and I think the CEOs of this world would take notice to develop and transform their business models to this positive impact, because less negative or keeping silent is clearly not the option anymore. This is where we are. It's very encouraging what is happening, by the way, because young people are speaking up, and not only the Gretas of this world, but young people are speaking up. Employees in companies are speaking up. Interestingly, the financial market is waking up to the risks that we are taking and the opportunities that we're not seizing. And I think increasingly, a broader group of companies sees the enormous opportunities. Companies that are more purpose-driven. Companies that better internalize the challenges of climate change. Companies that think about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Companies that have a more diverse workforce. For the first time in the history of mankind, we have the hard data to show that these companies are doing better. And not only doing better, they're well placed for the future of mankind. They're purpose-driven at their core, but they're able to translate that into very profitable business models, because they put that purpose at the center, ensuring that they have a positive footprint, that they all work towards making this a better place for all. The Dalai Lama said it well when he said that when we seek enlightenment for ourselves just to enhance our own causes, we actually miss purpose. But if we seek enlightenment to help others achieve their causes, we are with purpose. My simple message to you is, live a life with purpose. Thank you very much.